There was one thing when Tommy come to the Swans, he used to have the habit in team meetings of saying, now, is there anybody want to say anything? And every week he'd say, now, Roderick, is there anything you'd like to say? Roderick, he called him. And he'd say, yes, well, Diesel, I'd just love to see you down the back line at some stage today.
It's not a no-go zone, boys. You're allowed down.
And then he'd say, Warwick, is there anything you like? You just kick it at me. I'll get it. Just kick it at me. Put it up, fellas. I'll get it.
We should have a look at this particular goal that Rod Carter kicked, because when you play 293 games of AFL football, and this is it. There's Kappa with the ball, breaking away, wants the handball. Now he handballs.
Oh, no.
Rod Carter from 80 metres out, bangs it through.
He's pretty happy too.
Now, do you both barrack for the Swans now?
Look at this, Bob. Look at the excitement.
Congratulations.
The joy, the jubilation.
Yeah.
Had a bit of trouble getting back.
But they wanted to keep you up in the forward line after that.
I normally carry 3 or 4 teammates, but I was carrying about...
Can we ask you this question, Rod? Talking about playing on, you know, some of the great full forwards, and you know, some of the real tough ones. You would have played on Plugger when he was at St Kilda.
I didn't help him those days.
Now, there was an article last week, Tim Watson was saying that when they used to play against Geelong, they used to say to somebody, you know, stand in front, and Gary Ablett would come up and say, I wouldn't stand there if I was you, son. Now, did you ever stand in front of, say, you know, Plugger Lockett or one of those guys?
That's why I used to like running up the ground. The problem was this bloke...
The parting of the Red Sea, wasn't it?
The bloke, this bloke wouldn't talk too much. The only time he talked to you is after the bloke had put the knees in the back and you lay on the ground. He'd say, oh, sorry, mate, I should have... He was coming. But no, look, he did a great job because he did play on the best every week and did a fantastic job. And as Rod said, you know, fullback is, when teaching and coaching kids, it is a hard spot to play because mentally a lot don't want to play there.
How did you find Tommy Hafey? Because I know at the end of Collingwood, when he was at Collingwood, that a lot of the senior players jacked up and said they trained too hard. I was a youngster, so I just loved it. But yeah, that was the end of Tommy Hafey. How did you find the training drills and how Tommy trained you? And did you get through it as... Because you were the older statesman then?
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's polite. I'm putting it very politely there.
I know why he survived.
Yeah, I wasn't a great trainer towards the end of my career. I was the litmus test. If anyone ran inside me when we're doing laps, they were sacked the next year. But
Monday night flu rocket.
Every
Monday night.
Tommy was very good for me as a player in my football career, and also a lot of his coaching I took on board. His philosophy, I think his coaching philosophy was very good. I must admit, I actually fell asleep on the rub-down table at half-time in a game once because the training had been pretty solid. But you know, we wouldn't touch a footy sometimes until 3 or 4 weeks before the season started, and we just want to eat a footy when you got out there. And KB, you could relate to that in his training. It was torturous, wasn't it?
Well, I think the other thing that never adapted, which it is today, you know, you got the dietitians and you got everything else to go with it. Now, Sydney is different than Melbourne because of the humidity factor. And now, in '87, we got pumped in 2 finals after winning all those games in the middle of the year by, you know, when we kicked 200 points 3 weeks in a row, and we were flying and got a few injuries. But I know, looking back, I think I ended up that year at about 78 kilos, and I played about 83.
Gee.
So, and on average, I think everybody lost a lot of weight. And, OK, Tommy did train us hard, but I think that wasn't supplemented by diet and all these other things to go with it. And really, when we got into the finals, we were shot physically. And, you know, I don't think we trained that hard, but I don't think Tommy probably didn't adjust also.
The technology probably wasn't there at that time.
it wasn't there. Look, I was like Rod. I was at the stage of my career. I was, you know, 29, 30, and look, he was great. I got dropped twice as the vice captain in '87. But I said, well, you're playing we were sitting on top of the ladder at the time, and I said, well, that's fantastic. You know, I'm here to play in finals, and you know, and you knew where you stood with him. No grey area with Tommy, as we know.
293 games, Rocket. 7 games to the magical 300. I think in 1990, which was your last year, I think you retired for a week and then you came back out of retirement. Everyone was saying, you know, can he get to 300 games? Why didn't you get to the 300?
I think, I suppose, look, I was running out of time. I did have a groin injury that year, and I'd never missed more than 2 games in a row. and I ended up having a groin operation after the season. Could I carried it for the season? I think so, and I think the team was struggling, and the coach basically made the decision that he wanted to turn players over, and yeah, I suppose it was a bitter pill, but
could you have played, Rocket? Could you have played that 7 games?
What made me retire was the decision was made that I wouldn't play that week. Nothing was said to me before the team was selected, and everyone was aware of it. All the players were aware of it. So I missed that game, and I was in the reserves. I played in the reserves, and the following week we're playing Carlton, and Cole Kinnear, who was the coach, came and approached me and said, "I'm going to put you back in the seniors now. You know, I know Carlton players, you know, have a lot of respect for you. They don't like you in the team. So I'm going to bring you back in." I thought, well, that's fine. You know, if you had it done in a week early, things would be. So I decided to retire, and some people, teammates, and people around the club rang me and asked me to come back and see out the year, and they just felt that the way the club was at that time, it was in the interest of the club. So I made the decision to come back and play.
Is 7 games maybe too many to get you across the line? You know, like people play 298 and you think maybe 1 or 2, but 7 games, I don't know. I think if you didn't have a good year that year, did you, the club? So there wasn't going to be anything wrong with playing you for the 7, but do you think it's too many, Rod, or you still, it didn't really worry it that?
Oh, look, I think the situation is a lot of blokes play their 300 and then retire, and a lot are nursed. And I think at the start of the year I knew I wasn't going to be nursed, and I had to earn every game. And I had confidence in myself to do that until I got the groin injury, and I did struggle at training, and I thought my fitness was one of the things that normally.
How did you see that, Mark? How did you see that, Mark? You were shaking your head. Then you think they should have worked hard to get him across the line there?
I must admit, I was always the belief if you had 1 year left, you retire. Because I just think it puts too much pressure on everybody. And I honestly believe that was... Rocket did a great job. I think, life member, the AFL anyway.
Yep.
So, you know, he's got the benefits.
You don't lose that,
And I think he squeezed the very best out of himself.
Yeah, the 300 were made up of interstate games and things like that. Is that like
that's for
Worsfold?
AFL
That's a lot.
He played 293 day games, premiership games. Premiership games.
Yeah,
So
but to make a life membership, you had to play
300 of mixed,
of whatever you wanted.
Yeah, you're right.
So he's not bad. He's in the 0.1% of all players that's played in the history of the game. So I think he's done pretty well.
Yeah.
When you look back at those times in Sydney when Sydney made the finals that you're talking about, did you look back now with, you know, some sort of great feeling that, you know, a group of players went to Sydney, it was the old South Melbourne, went up there, looked like they were the chopping blocks of the competition, and all of a sudden you grew, you won those games, I think 3 games in a row where you kicked well over 200 points. I think it was maybe the only time it's happened in the history of the game. The place was jumping. Sydney were in the finals for the very first time coming to Melbourne, and probably when you look back now at Sydney, I mean, if it wasn't for you guys back then, it would never be what it is today, where, you know, they played in the finals last year and got through to preliminary final. Do you look back with a great deal of satisfaction?
It was funny, you know, because I talked to Tommy, you know, after I retired after a few years, and he said, we brought all those new guys into the club, and he said, you know, and I was a bit worried about how the older blokes would accept that. He said, but in the long term, he said, as Blake said, you know, the Jimmy Edmonds and all these guys come and went, he said, really, it still got back to the same blokes that kept the thing going. And I took that as a real, you know, it was initially Tommy saw that as maybe being a real problem, but ultimately it was the reason the place survived. And that's, I've got real, you know, huge character for not so much us, but the guys the Philip Plums that no one's ever heard of, who went up there and played 2 games. But made the move and made it happen. But actually, if you go back to 82, when we first went to Sydney, we won the night premiership in 82, and we had at that time, I don't think we realised what a good side we had, because we had the David Rees-Jones, the Silvio Fascinis, the Stevie Wrights, the Bernie Evanses, Anthony Danaher, Shane Morwood, all these players. And when I retired, there was something like 17 of those guys played over 150 AFL games who played in that team. You know, if we had been able to keep that group together, when we did go to Sydney, you never know, we might have had more success earlier than what we actually did.
There was a problem of keeping them in Sydney, though, wasn't it? Like Shane Moore would move, Fashini came back, you know.
Bernie Evans wouldn't train there.
Bernie Evans wouldn't train there, so you lost some class players.
I really felt for Johnny Northey, who coached for 1 year in '85, and that was the year that the club allowed half the players to move back to Melbourne. So we had two groups. We had some players living and training in Sydney, and I think game one we had something like 15 players living in Sydney in the 22. By the end of the year there was something like 15 players living in Melbourne. And Johnny Northey on the main night had something like 8 of the senior players.
Gee.
So how can you can't win in that environment?
It was an amazing situation really, because we were the first club ever to be picked up on any sport, ever to be picked up and put into another city and survive, fellas, and do your best. Coming from Fitzroy to South Melbourne, I thought the camaraderie of the place was fantastic, and there were some wonderful characters there, and there were.
But South Melbourne always had that reputation, didn't they? That it was a wonderful club to be at. I know when Whale Roberts went there from Richmond, and we lost the Whale, which we were so disappointed because he was the heart and soul and you know the jovial nature of the Whale. But when he went to South Melbourne, I mean, he just fitted in beautifully, and people loved him because it was that sort of club.
And Bobby, that went right back to the 50s with the Smoky Clegs and all the
that's
Smoky
right.
Sunday sippers.
Yeah,
were
that's
legendary
right.
down in South Melbourne.
And Basher used to take them all over the bowling club.
That's
right, the beauty, yeah.
Biggest hands I've ever seen, Bash.
That's right. Well, yeah, I wanted to play with South Melbourne more than anything in the world, you know.
But it always had that wonderful feeling, Rod, didn't it? That,
it did.
Good friendships.
It was interesting in that Mark was talking about problems that we faced, and we'd all relate to this. You sit down and you do a rundown on the opposition before the game. We're all sitting there talking and about the opposition, and Bernie Evans puts his hands up. Yes, Bernie. Look, we know the opposition, but the bloke sitting over there, what foot is he kicked with?
His own teammate.
Never seen him play.
Because they were training, the reserves played in Melbourne at that stage, so...
In for his first game, he's playing on a half-forward flank.
Who was it?
Who is he? With, Could you tell us something about him, please?
Who was the player that he asked of, though? Can you remember?
Oh, no. Bloke went to Richmond, that's terrible.
Who was he? They said, who was he?